What's the funniest way you've outsmarted a teacher? My math teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, had this humiliating rule where if you couldn't solve a problem she called on you for, you had to wear a bright pink dunce cap for the rest of class while sitting in a tiny kindergarten chair at the front of the room. She called it motivation through embarrassment. Mrs. Kowalski was a nightmare who seemed to feed off student misery. Short and stocky with steel gray hair and permanent scowl lines, she'd scan the room like a predator hunting for weakness. She kept that ridiculous pink dunce cap on her desk like a trophy, and the tiny plastic chair was positioned right where everyone could see your shame. The worst part was she'd deliberately call on students she knew were struggling, then act shocked when they couldn't solve advanced calculus problems we'd never learned. She'd make the dunce cap victims sit there for the entire 90-minute block while she taught around them, occasionally pointing and saying, "This is what happens when you don't apply yourself." One Tuesday, she announced a pop quiz for Thursday on derivatives and integrals. Anyone who fails will be spending Friday's class in our special chair discussing their study habits with the class. She handed out practice problems that looked like they belonged in a college textbook, but I'd been planning revenge since she'd humiliated my girlfriend Sarah 2 weeks earlier. Sarah had sat in that chair crying for an entire class while Mrs. Kowalski lectured about personal responsibility. I'd spent every night since then preparing for this moment. I discovered that Mrs. Kowalski used the same quiz bank every year. Problems from a 1987 calculus textbook that she thought no student would ever find. But my older brother had taken her class 3 years ago and kept all his materials. I had every single quiz answer memorized. Thursday morning arrived, and Mrs. Kowalski distributed the quiz with obvious excitement. "You have 30 minutes, she announced, "and I'll be selecting volunteers for tomorrow's demonstration based on today's performance." She was practically salivating at the thought of more humiliation opportunities. The quiz was brutal, as expected. Complex derivative chains and integration problems that would stump most college freshmen, but I'd seen every single question before. I finished in 15 minutes with perfect confidence while my classmates struggled desperately. Friday morning, she walked in carrying a stack of graded quizzes and that pink dunce cap. She started calling out names and scores. Jennifer, 23%. Michael, 31%. Sarah, 19%. Each student she called had to walk to the front, put on the dunce cap, and sit in the tiny chair while she explained their failures to the class. By the time she'd humiliated 6 students, there was a row of crying teenagers in pink caps sitting like kindergartners. Then she got to my paper. Her face changed completely. She looked at the quiz, then at me, then back at the quiz. "David Chen," she said slowly. 100%. The class went silent. She'd never seen a perfect score on one of her impossible quizzes. "David, would you please come to the front and explain to the class how you solved problem number 7? It was a trap. She wanted to humiliate me for cheating. I walked to the front confidently and grabbed the marker. I wrote out the solution step by step, explaining each part clearly. Mrs. Kowalski's face grew paler with each correct step. She tried 3 more problems, and I solved each one flawlessly. The class was staring in amazement. Here were 6 of their classmates sitting in dunce caps crying, while I was making Mrs. Kowalski's impossible problems look simple. Finally, she had no choice but to dismiss me back to my seat. After class, she called me to her desk. "How did you know those solutions?" she demanded. I just smiled and shrugged. "Good study habits, I guess." Her face turned red, but she couldn't prove anything.